Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I would like to share my thoughts on A Game of Hide and Seek by Elizabeth Taylor. This is Elizabeth Taylor's fifth novel, and having now read all of her novels, I would like to say that it's her best. In this book we have Harriet and Basie who meet when they are teenagers. They are tasked with looking after these two younger children, and as they look after these two younger children, they end up developing an infatuation with one another. Well, Harriet becomes infatuated with Basie. We never find out whether he feels the same way about her. And over the time that they are together in the first part of this book, you get the sense that it's very one-sided. He appears when he wants to, and he doesn't really treat her well. He ends up shipped off to university because he's seen as a bad influence, and Harriet, whilst heartbroken, ends up getting a job at a shop. I mention this because the shop scenes were some of the most humorous I have ever read as written by Elizabeth Taylor. I feel like she captured the environment incredibly well. Since Vesey is no longer in her life, she ends up marrying a man called Charles, and would you know it, 20 years later, when she's very happily married with a child, Vesey returns, which makes me laugh because one of the topics that Elizabeth Taylor constantly talks about is extramarital affairs. With this one, I found myself regularly reminded of the film Brief Encounter, and the characters even reference that at one point as having seen it in a film. There's a lot of people outside of the marriage and the possible affair that are talking about what Harriet's getting up to. Nobody actually knows the details, and she regularly denies that anything is happening. Indeed, all the reader ever sees is her meeting Vesey, and it seems very friendly, but it never seems like it's anything more than friendly. But then these people who are talking about Harriet, one of them says this: "And once I saw a film, a middle-aged couple in raincoats, and it all took place on a railway station. Can you believe me? In my day, we should never have cared for that. We did such things at home, in the proper place, when our husbands were out." That made me chuckle, and then a friend pointed out something to me about that passage of when our husbands were out, and he was like, well, of course your husbands are out when you're getting up to an affair, but what exactly were you getting up to? It is as much about what is unsaid as what is said, and as I say, it's humorous. It also felt like the most fully formed of Elizabeth Taylor's works. Sometimes there's cases where she throws in a shocking climax and ends the book, and there's a sense of finality to it. In this one, we are following them for a length of time, and we do see characters die, and we see how it affects them. We see how they use that to their own advantage. We get to talk about this book both pre and post Second World War. We get to see those changes and how it has affected these people. And then we have the ending. And the ending had this bittersweet quality that I really enjoyed, and I was so glad that that was the way that Taylor chose to end the book. It was phenomenal, really. I've been reading Elizabeth Taylor for 10 years now. The majority of those books have been read this year. It has been such an experience because I feel like when she does it well, she does fiction incredibly well. She is astute. She crafts descriptions that are so incredibly evocative. She gets people. Part of me wonders from reading this whether I ought to go and read Jane Austen, because apparently Elizabeth Taylor was so heavily inspired by Jane Austen, and I'm like, where? Because those books confuse me, but then I read these books and they're so bright and they capture people so well, and I think, I'm enamoured with Elizabeth Taylor's fiction, is all that I can say. Even when I've read a book by her that I haven't necessarily enjoyed, I have found something within there, maybe it's a vignette, maybe it's a piece of dialogue, that just gets people. And I definitely think this was an author who watched people and knew them, and that comes across vividly in her fiction. So I am glad to have finally finished reading all of Elizabeth Taylor's novels, but I also really look forward to revisiting them in the future and just meeting these characters again. I'm thrilled, and especially to have ended on such a high as A Game of Hide and Seek, because this was a thoroughly brilliant end, to my reading of this author's novels. And that's A Game of Hide and Seek by Elizabeth Taylor. If you've read this book and would like to discuss it, maybe even you're inspired to go and pick up a book by this author now, let me know in the comments. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, because until next time, that is all.